Hello YouTube and welcome to my channel. My name is Robert and today we are going to look at Roman mythology. I know that they borrowed the Greek gods and then just changed their names. And so let's take a look. I'm not familiar with them all. Maybe not. I don't remember all of them, because sometimes I get confused with the Greek ones also. And before we get into this, if you happen to like my content and wish to support my channel, please consider subscribing. It doesn't cost you anything, it's 100% free, and it really does helps the channel out. Hit the post notification bell when I drop new content. You'll be notified. Give the video a thumbs up and feel free to leave a comment. Okay, Roman mythology, here we go.
Okay, so besides history, mythology has always been a guilty pleasure of mine. And boy have I been waiting to do this topic for a while. As a function of popularity, Roman mythos isn't nearly as popular as its Greek counterpart, since the Romans were more preoccupied with empire building and Caesar killing than they were with their oral traditions. But they did name the planets after their deities, which is nice. Okay, so the Romans borrowed heavily from the Greek pantheons and also appropriated many of their homegrown deities into Greek equivalents. The Italian peninsula had been in contact with the Greeks for centuries, and Greek colonies were spread throughout the Mediterranean, so this was somewhat inevitable. To get some of the bigger famous gods out of the way, the Roman pantheon corresponded mostly with the third Greek dynasty called the Olympians. Zeus, Hera, and Athena became Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva respectively, the three patron gods of Rome. Ares, Aphrodite, and Poseidon became Mars, Venus, and Neptune. Hermes, with his cool winged shoes, became Mercury, the god of communication, transport, and commerce. The famous Titan equivalents are the first gods Uranus of the sky and Gaia of the earth, who, through their marriage, bore Saturn, one of the oldest and most famous gods of Roman mythology. Saturn was hugely important to the Romans, as he reigned the supreme deity and father of Jupiter, corresponding to his Greek equivalent Kronos. The age of Latin dominance over Italy is said to be attributed to him, and his name lives on in the planet Saturn and the sixth day of the week, Saturday. The winter solstice festival became dedicated to him in the month of December as Saturnalius, or Saturn Festival, and Christmas was later moved to December 25th to coincide with it, illustrating just how important it was to the Romans. Hades, the Greek god of the underworld, would become Pluto. Hephaestus, the Greek god of fire, became Vulcan, where the modern word volcano comes from. The odd one out was Apollo, who seems to have blended over time with some other deities. Classic Roman mythology places him with Greek Apollo, the son of Jupiter. But Apollo was also worshipped for many other things, and it's hard to pin down. He is portrayed as the patron god of Troy, which would later make him very important to the Romans. The Trojans worshipped him as the sun god, which seems to correspond with the Italian Etruscan god Sol, but also at various times been associated with Helios, who is not an Olympian but a Titan like Saturn, who is famous for drawing the sun across the sky in his chariot. All these inconsistencies were hand-waved somewhat, as the customs, festivals, and worship mattered a lot more to the Italians than the myths or the stories. But don't take my word for it, I wasn't there. Of the stories, there are some good ones. Hercules was adopted from the Greek hero Heracles, the son of Zeus and a mortal woman. Heracles was an immensely influential character in Roman times, and his stories feature heavily. Besides the well-known 12 tasks, Heracles also has stories featuring him in the Roman Empire, such as killing Vulcan's son Casus, the fire-breathing giant, or when he visited Germany with some of the locals identifying him as Thor. Hercules is said to have visited a town on the southern shores of Gaul and chased away the gods that were terrifying the locals. In honor of him, they built the temple of Hercules Maniakos, which I'm sure you've pieced together eventually became Monaco. Many of these stories were compiled into literature, the most famous of which was the Aeneid, an epic saga containing the founding myths of Rome. Virgil, the poet and writer, was commissioned by Caesar Augustus to write an epic poem about himself and his glorious life, to which Virgil said sure, and then immediately began work compiling a historical epic on the history of Rome to stick it to Augustus, who he didn't like very much. Virgil compiled several stories and sources relating to Rome's history into one epic saga spanning 3 continents and many years. Initially meaning to serve as a sequel to Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, but also heavily borrowing from both. The Aeneid, much like the Odyssey, picks up soon after the Trojan War, with Aeneas, a Trojan warrior and son of Venus, tasked with taking the Trojan survivors and finding them a new home. Either that or he ran away, sources disagree. The Trojan refugees took a fleet of ships and began their epic quest to find their prophesied new home of Italy. This being far too mortal a quest, the gods couldn't help themselves by getting involved. Aeneas' journey was interfered by competing gods who either did or did not want the Trojans to find a new home. Juno, Jupiter's wife, or niece, depending who you ask, was particularly ruthless in her attempt to stop Aeneas from getting to Italy, since it was foretold that his descendants would one day destroy and conquer Carthage, her all-time favorite city. Neptune, the god of the sea, helped the Trojan fleet by halting a storm sent by Juno, but not before it had blown them all the way to Libya. With some more divine intervention, eventually Aeneas made it to Carthage, where he stayed for 6 years, married the queen of Carthage, Dido, and generally became content, before a strongly worded suggestion from Jupiter via Mercury, who told Aeneas to get off his butt and start sailing again. The Trojans would quietly sneak off one night, and Aeneas would abandon his wife, angering her so much that she cursed Aeneas and vowed that Carthage will always be an enemy to his descendants. This is what those in the writer's business call foreshadowing. After a brief stop in Sicily, Aeneas finally arrives on the shore of Italy, and after a visit to the underworld, he learns of his destiny to become the father of the Roman Empire. So, no pressure. Hopping on his boat again, the Trojans settled the Italian kingdom of Latium and immediately started a war. Seriously, the rest of the book is just war between competing suitors to the Latin princess's hand. Tiberinus, god of the Tiber River and son of the Titan Oceanus, helped Aeneas in the war. He once again assured Aeneas that Italy was to be his home and that he should found a settlement and become father to the world's greatest empire. Aeneas then founded the city of Alba Longa in Latium and became its first king. His descendants would rule the city until the birth of the princess Rhea Silva. Rhea became pregnant with the sons of the Roman god Mars, eventually giving birth to twins she named Romulus and Remus. Their granduncle, the king of Elba, saw them as a threat to his rule and ordered them killed, whereupon they were thrown into the Tiber River to die. Tiberinus then rescued the twins, and a she-wolf found the boys and suckled them to keep them alive. The boys grew up in an area of 7 hills and became great warriors, and after learning who they were, they led a revolt against the king their uncle, who had himself usurped the throne from Romulus and Remus's grandfather Numitor. With Numitor back on the throne, the twins returned to the 7 hills they were raised on. A disagreement on where to settle down led to a fight between the two, and Romulus killed his brother. Romulus then created a settlement and named it after himself, Rome, and reigned as its first king. And that is how the Trojan refugees would live on to become the legendary founders of the Roman Empire.
Oh, really?